just when you think there's a quiet moment, tariffs are always going to come back into the picture. So it was only a matter of time before this popped back up again. But the big underlying irritant is that Canada hasn't yet come to the table with the USMCA review talks. It's been entirely just the US and Mexico up until this point. And so to my understanding, it seems like the US really wanted something to pressure Canada to concede some of the irritants, whether it be with some of the provinces still ban US alcohol. There's been some long-standing issues with dairy access and auto access. So this is all of those long-term issues kind of bubbling up here. And we still have 30 days before the Trump administration actually puts these tariffs into effect. So we'll see if anything that the prime minister does in response to it actually helps mitigate the tariff threats.
Yeah, 30 days is actually longer than usual. Usually it's 2 weeks
Yes.
for anything to happen. On top of that, there is the added irritant of the wildfires from Canada over the last few days. It's cleared up since then. But Alicia, talk a little bit about how this feels like a kitchen sink of all of President Trump's grievances against Canada.
Exactly. And it's good that you mentioned that because that was top of our minds coming into this. Trade Ambassador Jameson Greer denied that this has anything to do with the wildfires, largely because the legal basis of this is those irritants described in the report, which is discrimination against the auto sector, against the dairy sector. However, we can't ignore the fact that President Trump, just days before this came out, said that he wanted to add tariffs to the cost of the Canadian wildfires. So it'll be interesting to see what President Trump says and if he creates any explicit linkage between this threat and his previous complaints, from a couple days ago.
Okay, so these tariffs would be on things including, as you said, milk, beer, plywood, but also hockey equipment.
That's
which
going over the top.
I know. So I looked at that and I was like, whoa, now you're throwing down the gloves. Alicia, what is the likelihood or the possibility that maybe the USMCA, which is itself a successor to NAFTA, gets taken apart and the U.S. just strikes bilateral deals with Mexico and then a bilateral deal with Canada?
That's definitely the track that they're on right now. Talking to sources, there's a lot of, theorizing about maybe the U.S. will, like you said, just do these two separate bilateral deals, one with Mexico and one with Canada. There's also the question of maybe the U.S. creates like a framework deal with Mexico and just brings that to Canada and says, hey, you guys have to sign on, whether you like it or not. But all of these actions are pressuring Canada in some way. Of course, President Trump has expressed his disdain for some of Canada's actions. Last year he floated the idea of bringing them on as a 51st state. So there's definitely a lot of political issues intertwined with these tariff threats.
What is Canada's strategy for trade negotiations with the U.S.? We have about 30 seconds left.
It's a great question. And the U.S. side has been very quiet with this. They said that Canada is engaging with talks, but isn't necessarily bringing the explicit actions that they would want. So I think it's a matter of time to see whether this sort of prompts some concessions on their part or if Canada continues to stay strong and stand by some of the actions it's done.